unlucky enough to be working on the 73rd floor of the World Trade Center when planes flew in. I was like in my brain thinking the game was over before the game was really over.
Hi, John, and welcome to the Healing Hour.
Hi.
I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we're going to dive into quite a bit today, your personal journey, your purpose, but let's start with the basics. So my guest today is John Hoekman. He's a seasoned entrepreneur, having built businesses in wellness, longevity, and finance over the past 30 years. And as an avid lifelong sports and fitness enthusiast, John has become an expert in human optimization, specializing in recovery and longevity protocols, devices, and techniques. And now I'm really grateful because you're part of the Healing Company, where he's helping us expand our community of brands and introducing us to amazing new innovations in the healing space. Is there anything I missed?
Wow, just trying to sum up your life and work in a couple of sentences. I guess the only thing I would add is that I am the father to three beautiful daughters, ranging in age from 5 months old to 22 years old, and have a incredible fiance who, navigates the blended family with such grace. And it's just really, I feel blessed.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Sorry I missed that. But let's start at the beginning. So what put you on this path, this career in your life rooted in wellness?
If I really want to trace it back as early as my, kind of elementary school, my father was an orthopedic surgeon, and we would go out in nature, every weekend and be trucking around, and we'd come back to the house with, samples of pond water that we would look at under a microscope, and little, tadpoles that we would watch grow into frogs. I just had this very vivid memories of the curiosity and wanting to know how things worked. And then later in life, like dissecting those frogs and things like that. I was always tearing things apart to see how they worked. And that kind of led me down this path where I went to the University of Michigan as a pre-med student. And after 3 years decided to, kind of go in a different direction. But again, I have a lot of chemistry and science and biology and that kind of thing in terms of my educational background. And I was also a very avid sportsman. I loved contact sports, in particular, ice hockey, American football, extreme skiing, all the kind of things where I just kind of beat the crap out of myself and, was not injured all the time, but was like, had ongoing,
overly disciplined.
Exactly. Exactly. So combination of those things. And then, my path eventually led into kind of a Wall Street career, and then, kind of went down the path that way. As I got 20 years down that path, I pulled the kind of ripcord on that life and kind of got back into like kind of my core authentic, self, which was like focused on wellness and startups. And at that time, that first year, I met some amazing women who were starting a business called Higher Dose. You've probably heard of. Yeah. And it was, the dose is short for dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, all your happy chemicals. And it was the first time that I really, kind of heard about biohacking and the word biohacking. And it was self-healing was so intriguing to me. And it just like everything clicked. It was everything that I knew and all the things that I had done. And then, from someone at that time who was carrying around an industrial sized jar of Aleve with a sidecar of Pepsid to help cure my stomach, I feel like, at that time, it really maybe saved my life. It for sure changed my life in such a way where I started doing all the things. And cold therapy, in particular, cryotherapy and ice bathing, was something that just enabled me to address all my pain and inflammation, and also helped immensely with, mental resilience. And it really changed the trajectory of my life. And so eventually I, went down the path and started up a business, doing all those things and all the recovery protocols, which is, cryotherapy and infrared saunas and IV drips and so forth.
And I know that there have been some like major life events that happened in your life that were particularly life-changing for you. Can you share a little bit about that?
It was a combination of trauma in my life. It's not just physical trauma, but also mental trauma. And, I was unlucky enough to be working on the 73rd floor of the World Trade Center when the planes flew in. My 22-year-old was 6 months old at the time, and I was, I walked out of the building tower. I was working at Morgan Stanley at the time, 10 minutes before the building collapsed. So that led to a lot of, for the first time in my life, a lot of depression and other things where, it was a real understanding for the first time of what depression was. Up until that point, I always felt like if you were depressed, then just, exercise and
get over it.
Get over it, what's wrong. And not understanding how, chemical that reaction is, and going from a place where I was the captain of every team that I was ever on in football and hockey and sailing and so forth. And it wasn't because I was the best athlete necessarily, but I was really the most optimistic guy. And there was no world in which we'd be behind by 2 goals with a minute left in the game. And it was like, hop on my back. We're not losing. Let's go. That was the first time in my life where I, at that moment, after the second plane hit our tower and that 45 minutes before our getting out, I was like in my brain thinking the game was over before the game was really over. And, it's the kind of thing that...
It's the first time that actually that's pessimistic thoughts came into your mind.
Yeah, in a significant way. And it lasted. And those are the kind of things that create, PTSD and depression and anxiety. And, and it's not easy to get over that. But it's led me down this path in such a way where it's not just about the, physical pain, but also mental.
Every time you tell me that story, I get goosebumps, because I think no one can really imagine what a person like you goes through being in that moment, being able to escape and turning around, seeing a building collapse where you could have been in, just if it happened a couple minutes earlier. What were the thoughts that came up in your mind when you managed to get out and you're already in shock, but then you actually see, oh my God, the building is not existing anymore?
It was one of those things where when I got home and I looked at the TV, and finally I was holding my 6-month-old daughter, Liv, in my arms, and I just never thought that I was going to make it home. And when I looked, there was one tower, and I couldn't believe there was so much smoke that you couldn't see the other tower, and it was already collapsed. It just never occurred to me that was going to happen. So in the aftermath of that, after the second one came down and weeks following, it was just like there's a tremendous amount of you get survivor's guilt. I remember very vividly, kind of running out and watching the faces on the firemen who were running in at the same time, and God bless their souls. It was just like those are very vivid memories that you kind of live with and come back. And it's in some ways cathartic to tell the stories again, but it's the wounds are still there.
And would you say that all the chronic pain that happened to you afterwards was a result of what you went through?
The chronic pain that I have is more, arthritis and other types of things from having, now this shoulder replaced, this hip replaced, 3 surgeries on this knee, disc fusion in my neck, 2 front teeth that were knocked out with a hockey stick. And so, more surgeries than I care to admit. I will say that the things that we do in the kind of human optimization world, and particularly, we'll talk about this more later, but addressing, stress and chronic stress and chronic pain and so forth, they're things that kind of get to the root cause of mental issues as well. Mm-hmm. Stress is a killer, and it's something that really, we need to focus on.
Yeah, totally. And that's what I thought, because I feel like sometimes, even if it's now, you say it's because of my arthritis and because of my hip replacements, I sometimes think that life events like these, right, where they cause you a lot of depression, PTSD, and stress, they somehow manifest in your body. And maybe you wouldn't have had to have all of these hip replacements or would have these issues now if that wouldn't have been a life event. Like things that you hold on to manifest in your body in some kind of way.
Absolutely. And I think that there's such great work that's being done now in terms of looking at the, gut microbiome and the gut-brain axis and that kind of thing, where you kind of are getting a much better understanding of how those levels of stress, and even if it's not physical stress, it's mental stress that has a very negative impact on your physical well-being. Not just your mental state, but also your physical well-being is a function of your mental well-being. Yeah. And so, it's very much the case.
In wellness, we a lot talk about the how. So how to implement new habits, how to eat better, how to work out better. But I feel like a lot of times we really miss the why, the deep why behind why should we do this, and why are people actually sticking to these habits, and why are others not? And if you were to sum up your why in one sentence, what would that be?
It goes back to a book that I read some time ago by Viktor Frankl, the Man's Search for Meaning. And it's, the why is such an important thing. And I feel like, as someone who has had all these experiences and gone down this path and has been able to kind of address the issues and kind of in no way, kind of consider myself fully healed, but I certainly have addressed a lot of my demons and then my educational background, my competitive nature, all those things kind of like put me in a position where I feel like this is my, what I was meant to do. And when I kind of have done some deep work with, plant medicine and so forth. And, I kind of came away with that and thinking about like survivor's guilt, as I mentioned, and it's like, I kind of feel like I was put on this earth and I was saved and I am here for this purpose to help save the world from itself in some way, to help this healing journey, do what I can to try to, provide and, educate people and help other people in a way that might not be able to or understand or find ways of doing it cheaper and doing it in a way that is more accessible to the masses.
And to show people that everything is possible, right? I think that's you really show is that even going through such a traumatic event in your life could have gone into a completely different way, right? But you turned it around and you were like, okay, I've given this chance in my life. I'm going to do something about it and I'm going to optimize myself in a way that I will be able to help others on this journey as well. And I think that's really, really powerful, which I'm very honored that you're part of the Healing Company.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah.
We as humans, we give ourselves a lot of labels. So we're female and male and blonde and brown and tall or small. We're from Germany, from the US. But if you were to remove all these labels that were ever given to you since childhood, how would you describe yourself?
Look, I kind of, use a lot of sailing analogies in life. And I kind of look at myself as like a captain, if that's a label or not. I mean, I just like in terms of like what it takes to be a captain on a sailing vessel. And it's like there's grit and there's determination and there's perseverance. There's different kinds. You have to make quick decisions and you need to have commitment when you're like making a decision. These are all things that are kind of really important to me. It's like being in nature and my love of nature. And with your crew, it's having, being kind of treating people, your crew with respect, loyalty. And, I'm like fiercely loyal to my friends and family. And it's kind of also love of nature and love of people and love of, kind of that kind of thing and being competitive and having fun. So those are the kind of things that I think about in terms of describing myself as being kind of all those things without really putting a label on it. I guess that's kind of the best that I can do with that. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I don't know if I can still put it together correctly, but I think last week or something, I was talking to someone and he said that actually captains of sailing boats are like one of the sharpest people because they have to make like life decisions within seconds when the weather hits or something. And they're not only responsible for themselves, but for their crew as well. And so the people are extremely like able to react quickly in positive ways. So I thought that was really, really interesting.
I like to hear that. I do. And I think that the other, kind of important component to that is maintaining a sense of calm.
Oh, yeah.
When
key.
The world around you is collapsing and falling and the sky is literally falling in. There's a squall that happens, whatever it is.
And you're like, there is a way, I'll find it.
And these are the kind of things that translate very well into life.
Have you always been sailing?
I started sailing when I was 6 years old. I lived on my father's sailboat every summer. We just kind of decamped and we, I grew up in Michigan. We went to the shore of Lake Michigan and we had, all four of us kids and my mother, living on a sailboat during the week. I taught sailing when I was old enough. I took, all the lessons and raced, every weekend. It's really, kind of my number one passion behind family.
Yeah, we just started sailing recently. And for me, it's like being on a sailing boat. I've never been so close with this like sense of freedom and being free and connected to nature and everything out there as I am when I'm on a sailing boat. Like I forget everything. There's not like a single thought that comes into my mind in any negative way when I'm on a sailing boat. I'm so present in that moment. It's beautiful.
Yeah, as much as I love to race sailboats and there's a very competitive nature about me and I love that, I love to sail. Ever since I was very little, my mom would be sitting by the pool and her friends would ask, well, where's John? And I would be, he's sailing and I'd be like out by myself for like 6 hours at a time, just kind of in my little Optimist, kind of popping around. And I'd stop off to play video games at the local, deli or whatever, because you could kind of, pop around on this lake. It was an offshoot of Lake Michigan. But at any rate, yes, I think you're so right. And just that sense of clearing your mind, it's like, to me, it's so meditative, and it leads to, again, that reduction in stress, kind of re-centers your body and kind of puts you in a flow state.
Exactly. I love that, the flow state.
Yeah.
And if you're in a flow state, you're just experiencing joy, and it's like the best feeling.
Absolutely.
Best feeling. But I would love to dig a little bit into the history of biohacking, because you're obviously pretty deep into that. And I think at this point, everyone really knows the term biohacking, but that wasn't always the case. When did you first encounter this idea or term in general?
It was like 2015. It was my kind of first summer after kind of like racking on moving in a different direction in life. And when I was helping the women from Higher Dose secure some seed funding and, negotiate their first lease and that kind of thing. And so that was the first time, 2015.
And who do you think biohacking is for? Because for me, the first time when I heard the word, I was a little bit like, okay, I don't feel like I can be part of this, because it sounded so complicated, complex, and scientific that it actually kind of like, I took a step back from it. But that's not the case, right? Biohacking can actually be really simple.
I don't love the word biohacking anymore. It used to be very novel, and it was something that I was kind of into, and I kind of, because it wasn't something that was, but I feel like it is kind of become more of an elitist kind of a term, and something that's very male focused and male dominant in the space. And it's something where a lot of people kind of don't understand. They think it's very expensive and so forth.
Exactly.
Where I kind of, move more towards something like human optimization and other things, performance optimization, or just like, the whole idea of hacking is kind of basically what biohacking can be free. And like, it's as simple as, sticking your feet in the sand in order to ground yourself, or taking a cold shower.
It's like basically bringing your body back into homeostasis.
Yeah, but it's kind of harnessing and taking the, the natural healing powers of Earth. It's sunlight, it's cold, it's heat, it's like all those stresses those intermittent stressors that are very important for your body. And the hacking side is like, okay, if I'm living inside, if I live in a place that's rainy all the time, I can't manage my schedule and do things on such a way where I can be in the sun when I need to and when it's there and so forth. How can I replicate Earth's natural healing properties and put it into a machine so I can do it when I want it? And how can I do that in 5 minutes as opposed to a half an hour? That's kind of where this whole idea came. It's like hacking Earth's natural power. So the idea really is kind of getting back to a point where we're actually, using the Earth's natural powers.
Yeah. And how can we make it accessible every day, everywhere we want to?
Right. And cheaper. That's the point, really, is that if you're living in the Pacific Northwest where it's raining all the time, but you really know that, having some sun exposure is going to help with your testosterone levels and your mood and, your circadian rhythms and that kind of thing, but it's not there, then how are you actually going to get that? Well, you can build a red light.
And is there any areas in particular that you're really interested in optimizing with technology?
Like all of those things, it's really that. There's some very cool devices out there that aren't cheap that, do that. And so the idea would be to try to find ways of making it, cheaper. And that is like kind of red light. I mean, an ice bath or a cold shower is one of the things that you can just do, every morning, particularly when it's in the winter time and it's like the least likely time where you'd want to take a cold shower. Those are the kind of things that you can do. But using technology for this kind of human optimization is a combination of those machines and vibration therapy to stimulate stem cells, that kind of thing, where you can do that, or you can try to walk, barefoot for a period of time.
What is vibration therapy? I've never heard of that.
There's a technology that I love. It's a machine called the Juvent, which is micro-impact therapy. And basically what they've, kind of found in doing studies with NASA and so forth, because they were trying to address astronauts who, after being weightless for, 30 days lose, 2% of their bone density. So how do you, kind of address osteoporosis and, loss of bone density and so forth? And what they found is like when you look at the skeleton, the primary purpose of your skeleton is really not structural. It's not to hold up your body. It's really metabolic. It's the marrow. And when you walk barefoot, that stimulates in your bones the production of red and white blood cells, T cells, and mesenchymal stem cells. Mm-hmm. So, if you walk outside barefoot for, 10 miles, then you're doing that. And that's what we used to do, but we don't do that anymore. So they basically, kind of found a way of, kind of vibration. It's a very unique resonance and vibration that they put into a micro impact. They call it not vibration because it's more of a micro impact that's stimulating your bones to produce stem cells, and it's very healing. You feel it and you stand on it for 10 minutes to 20 minutes. And after doing this for a period of time, your shoulder feels better, your hands feel better, your neck feels a little bit better. So those are the kind of things that
And why is it that when the feet are in shoes, it doesn't have the same?
Because of
the way it moves?
It's just the rubber is meant to soften the impact, So when you're kind of running and so forth, that is a lot of stress on your knees and so forth. And over time, your feet hurt, so forth.
So it absorbs a little bit of the.
Yeah, I mean, look, we don't. It's like we don't do that anymore. If we were walking around barefoot all day, every day, then we wouldn't really think about it. But it would be great. I love it too.
I love walking barefoot.
Nowadays, like I've been, outside a few times. It's spring. You take your shoes off. You start walking around. You're like, you feel like
so
every little thing.
Yeah.
You're so sensitive. Yeah. So it's like, until you build up those, calluses and so forth, you're not really able to do that. So it's kind of like, again, it's a hack. It's like stand on this plate for 20 minutes and it simulates walking, for 20 miles barefoot.
Yeah. Amazing. That's what I love the most about living in Australia. I was literally barefoot 24/7, living in Bondi. I went grocery shopping barefoot, went to the coffee shops barefoot, I went to restaurants barefoot, and it was so totally normal. It was like socially accepted. And I loved it. I just felt so much better and connected actually to and grounded walking barefoot than I do now in shoes.
That's such a good point. I mean, being people, when you say like, I'm a very grounded person, I'm grounded, grounded is a thing. It's like when you touch a doorknob and you get a shock, it's that you're not grounded. Your body, because we have shoes on all the time. When you connect with the earth, there's a natural resonance and a vibration, the Schumann resonance. And if you kind of connect yourself with that, then you reground yourself. It realigns your cells. It kind of helps your whole body work better. It helps the flow of your, blood through your body. It helps your tissues to heal. It's kind of like all the kind of like, charges. Every cell in our body has an electrical charge. There's a positive and a negative. And if they get out of line, if there's more positives or negatives, then that's, so when you ground yourself, then it grounds and realigns all those polarities inside your body.
Do you see a correlation between biohacking and longevity?
Yeah, I mean, so like when you think about all these, a lot of these technologies that are out there, they were kind of designed originally to address and very deeply debilitating autoimmune disorders and other diseases that have come up. Whether there's multiple sclerosis or rheumatoid arthritis or other type of fibroid. There's so many different things. So people start using these to address those issues. They're like, oh, wow, well, this actually, if I don't have that, it actually enhances my performance. And I think better, my brain works better, my body works better. And then we start taking it a step further, you start really testing. You find that in some instances with the right kind of, balance across the various things, then maybe your biological age is declining because of these various interventions. A lot of this, again, it's like if you can do it in nature and you can do it for free, even better. You can address things from a nutrition standpoint. But, from a longevity perspective, these things play very well into that because it's kind of addressing imbalances that you have in your system and deficiencies that you have.
Yeah, totally makes sense. I never thought about it that way, but it totally makes sense. What do you think personally is the most life-changing biohacking tip that you've experienced? Or
People say stress kills all the time. And it's like, we live in a stressful state, and there is a very distinct pathway that happens. So when you're in a state of stress, it's, historically it was like, okay, I'm either in fight or flight when I'm running away because I'm trying to save myself from someone who's trying to eat me, or I'm in rest and digest. Those are your parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest, and the sympathetic, which is, running away, fight or flight.
Deepak just said to me like 2 weeks ago, he was like, it's so funny. People nowadays stress about not being stressed. I looked at him, I'm like, true.
Yeah. I mean, if you're not busy, if you're not, kind of doing something, feeling like you're productive, if you're like reading a book, sometimes you stress about, like, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. It's like it happens. But that constant state of stress is something that turns off. My fiance's sister was in a very traumatic situation recently, and she said, I could hardly talk because I had such dry mouth. Those are the kind of things that happen when you're so stressed. Your saliva doesn't work. Your liver doesn't work. Your body kind of turns off all those functions and features and detoxifications that aren't needed right at that moment because you have to get the hell out of there. So when you live in this constant state of stress, when you're kind of semi-stressed or thinking about those kind of things, those are the kind of things that trigger your vagus nerve, which runs all the way through your body to kind of tweak and turn off and turn the little dials and turn down your liver, turn down your pancreas, turn all these things down in such a way where your body isn't working the way that it should be. So how do you address that from a if you want to call it biohacking, or if you whatever, it's sleep and movement, and then some form of relaxation, which I think that probably the number one is breathing. Just like slow, methodical breathing, 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out, or box breathing, or that kind of thing. So those things are, I think, in combination, are the things that are most important to kind of like consider, and they're free. You can do all these things without going to a center or going to, a gym or whatever. You just, walking is what I mean by movement. You just need to get out and move your body every day. So it's because also like moving and like high intensity also is a source of stress, right? And I think sometimes people forget that. They're like work out every day and they go like on sprints and interval training and HIIT training and I don't know, all these things. And then they're like, I don't know why I'm working out all the time. Like, why am I not like, why is my body so stressed? Because they feel that is maybe like balancing out their stress, but it's also a form of stress. Absolutely. So there's chronic stress and intermittent stress. And intermittent stress can also be called like a hormetic stressor. And what those are things like cold therapy and heat therapy and so forth. So if you think about it, like trees that grow in a very windy environment the wood is much, much stronger than trees that grow in an environment where there's no wind. And humans that grow in environment and put themselves through various stressors. You go out and you exercise hard, but you recover. Put yourself in a sauna, and then you put yourself in cold therapy, and you go back and forth, and you allow yourself to recover. It makes you more resilient.
I just had to learn that because I went for a run every single day. At some point, I felt like, I really had hormonal issues, like a lot. And I broke my heel at some point. And I went to the doctors and they were like, what the hell did you do? Like, we've never seen a broken heel. Like, we rarely see it. Did you jump off from like a building or something? I was like, no, I went running. And they were like, it's so insane that happened to you while going jogging, because that just means that your body was so under stress and your bones, they could no longer hold it. And so I really had to teach myself to actually like reduce the amount I was running and find different ways of movement, like yoga, or just like waking up in the mornings, doing some stretching and like focusing on breath work, and then doing like my HIIT trainings or runnings like 2 to 3 times a week, but not anymore 7 days a week, because my body wasn't able to cope with it. And I think that's something that people like have to learn as well, is become really aware of yourself, because not everyone is able to cope with the same amounts of stress. And even if that's just intermittent stress or chronic stress. But I think it's so much about bio-individuality, which I think is so interesting as well. Do you have any heroes in the biohacking or scientific community?
I'm kind of a closet geek. I mean, as I may have mentioned, I like a lot. I'm very dig into science and technology, and I like to know how things work. And so the people who kind of resonate with me the most are those that kind of like dig in on technology and science. And I think there's people like, Andrew Huberman, Rhonda Patrick, and, Peter Attia. I think these are the people in this space that are really kind of, doing the right work.
Yeah.
Dr. Zach Bush is another who I think is like a microbiome expert who, I think is really focused in the right way on the root cause and our food supply and so forth. So yeah, those are the people who I think, really, and Deepak, of course, and his focus on all things mindfulness and, kind of Ayurveda and so forth, which is really just so important on the kind of getting back to this kind of sense of balance in nature.
And I would love to hear your thought about this term HRV, because I think it's something that has become much more popular in the last couple months, I would even say. And it's a term that no one was really aware of or looked at prior to that. And now there are obviously all these new technologies out there that tell you your HRV, like my Garmin. I checked it every morning, how my HRV was after sleeping. Can you talk to us about the HRV and if it's that important as it seems?
I would say that it's not one important thing, it's the most important thing. I mean, I might go that far. Yeah. I really think that HRV is kind of when you look at, if you wanted to look at one number that's going to show your general, kind of level of health and directionally it would be looking at your HRV. And HRV is, it measures the variability between the beats of your heart. And so when you look at HRV and you say, okay, a high HRV is better than a low HRV, in your brain, you'd think maybe like, okay, well, why, how could that be? You'd think like a regular heartbeat would be, healthier than an irregular heartbeat, but it's not. It's basically, it's the ability to kind of self-regulate and have like those variability in such a way where when you're doing things and stressing yourself that you can come back to a state of homeostasis in a more rapid fashion. And so it's been just shown through lots of studies now that, when you look at this as a general measure, the higher your HRV is, the better off you are.
And how exactly does it get measured? Like, how do they measure HRV?
It's basically, they are measuring, when you lift your heart rate, it's like to-tune, like this, to-tune, so forth. And it's the measuring of the distance between those, peaks and troughs, and then it kind of averages that. So that's the best way to understand. It's like in general, it's like.
So the higher the HRV is, the higher the distance between.
It's the more irregular it is. It's not the distance. It's like, okay, it's this, and it's back and forth all the time. It's not the same, all the time. And so it basically is a measure of how quickly you're going to recover. Your heart and your heart rate is going to recover from, having these intermittent stresses, and how well you deal with stress.
Yeah. And what do you think is like one of the things that majorly affects it? And how could we improve our HRV if we, for example, have a low one?
Like the things that like majorly affects, it's like, kind of exercise and sleep and nutrition. It's kind of like a lot of the same, alcohol for sure.
I see it. When I drink alcohol in the evenings, I look in the mornings, my HRV is so much worse than it was like on days where I had
absolutely. I mean, all the things that you kind of can easily think of that are healthy versus not so healthy. And the things that I talked about, which are kind of like, relaxation and being able to get yourself into a real state of flow and relaxation and just kind of mindlessness, instead of mindfulness. It's kind of like, being not really thinking about anything and just being in a kind of a state of, bliss.
Peace. Yeah. And what would be like the long-standing benefits of improving our HRV?
It's health span. It really is longevity. Like kind of, from a longevity perspective, I even in longevity, it's another overused word, I think, now, longevity, which is like, because people in general are like, I don't want to live longer. All my friends will be dead.
It's about health span, not lifespan, right?
I'm going to be in a wheelchair.
Getting 150 and feeling horrible. It's about
so it's really like great. It's like being healthier longer.
Yeah.
And so these are the kind of things that enable you to have, vitality and, really be youthful. and like in a way that's like your mind is still working, all that cognitive decline that you get, and various plaques, that amyloid plaques and other things that build up in your brain that kind of like the precursors to things like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and so forth. There's a lot of things that we can do, even if we're genetically predisposed to, in our family and our makeup, to having this as something that's in our bloodline and something that may be kind of likely at some point. There's things that we can do to change the expression of those genes, your epigenome, in such a way through nutrition and through your daily routine and so forth, that you can push out potentially the onset of those symptoms by many years, and that's health span. So the idea is trying to, and with our HRV, by focusing on that as a measure, it really shows how resilient you are and how you deal with stress. And as I said, again, it's like I can't overemphasize how important it is.
And do you have what would be the 3 biohacking tips to improve our HRV? Is there something as well? Is there a correlation?
I think it's the things that I mentioned earlier when you asked me about what are my top tips for biohacking. It's basically sleep, movement, and some form of relaxation, and all the other stuff are things that I think benefit, that will benefit. Those would be the 3. Those would be the 3 top. But so like from a sauna, for example, has been proven in studies that I say proven, but there's kind of some longitudinal, kind of longer term kind of evidence that if you are taking a sauna 4 times a week for 20 minutes at, a traditional sauna at 170-ish degrees, then that will lower your all-cause mortality from cardiovascular disease by over 50%.
Oh, wow.
So, but that's another stressor. So is that how does that work? Is that because part of the impact of that is probably raising your HRV. That would be a component to that. And also, I look at things like, cold therapy, which is as much, I look at it, a lot of people look at it as a reduction in inflammation. You look at professional athletes getting in an ice bath after they get off the football field or hockey rink or whatever, and it helps in that way. But for the average person, it really helps with your mental resilience. Just getting in there and overcoming that obstacle in your brain of how it's going to feel, and then staying in and getting through that process and breathing through it and regulating your heart rate, because you get in there and your heart starting to breathe through it and self-regulating your heart rate. You do that again and again, and your heart learns to self-regulate in such a way, and that's another kind of thing that's going to increase your HRV.
Yeah, and you're able to overcome the stressor for much longer periods of time than at the beginning of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the next time you're in a stressful situation, you can self-regulate yourself and be that kind of sense of calm in a storm.
And as we spoke earlier, we're obviously right now in this epidemic of stress. How can the right lifestyle help us overcome this? And how do you personally equip your body for the daily stressors of this world?
It's kind of like there's little habits and routines that you can get into. So from having a better sleep. These are things that are not always easy. There's always stuff that gets in the way. Living in New York City and having a lifestyle where people have dinner at 10 o'clock at night and so forth. It's
tough.
it's pretty tough. You can't eat at 7 and then go to dinner. Everyone orders and just have
and you just sit there
with
super nuts on social. You're one guy, no one wants to have a dinner anymore.
Exactly. There's things that get in the way. For me, I've kind of skewed very much on the side of going to bed early, waking up early. I intermittent fast. Those are the kind of things that I have in terms of my daily routine. But again, it's really, if there was one thing I would say that is the kind of thing that works best to kind of lower stress levels is breathing. It's breath work. It's really kind of being very thoughtful about how you breathe and having, a longer span between your breaths and breathing in and out, and trying to, kind of find a way of doing one in and out every 10, 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out ish kind of thing. So it's 6 breaths.
That's what I do every morning.
Or so. And if you can do that
It's
for kind of tone yourself for about 5 minutes. And if you get up in the morning and you just start really concentrating on that 5 in, 5 out, that's how, incidentally, that's kind of how I time myself when I'm taking cold exposure is through breathing. So it's how many breaths, if I take those breaths and I do, 6 breaths that way, then that's a minute. Do 18, and that's 3 minutes. And that's kind of like how in my breath, so I'm kind of like focusing on my breathing and kind of at the same time trying to manifest positive outcomes.
Yeah, it does. And it's so calming and grounding as well. I think that's one thing, again, it's a grounding aspect of it. I do it every morning. Sometimes I manage to do my yoga. I don't manage to do it every day. But the one thing I do every day, and if it's like on my yoga mat or in the shower, I do the steam room. I do like 10 minutes of 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out breath. And it's like the way it just calms me and sets me for the day is so powerful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm starting a pranayama course next week with Eddie.
Oh, cool.
Actually. And it's 2 weeks, every day for an hour, 6 to 7 a.m.
Amazing.
Where we're going into like the advanced learnings of breathwork and pranayama. So,
I love that.
Yeah, I'm going to send you the link. Maybe you can join as well.
I would love to. I would love to. Yes.
As you know, at the Healing Company, we really strongly believe in prevention versus treatment, and that we have to shift this paradigm from treatment to prevention. Why do you think this is so important in today's world? And why do you think that the methods of prevention that have been used now, some of them work and some of them don't really?
I feel like, our kind of paradigm shift, and people are on the right path. I think in general, there's so many more. Look at the success of Whole Foods, for example, and like more people are eating organic, and they're focused on kind of factors. And COVID kind of accelerated, the people like thinking about how do I stay healthy, how can I get through this if I ever kind of get the contract and so forth. And so there's more and more people talking about and thinking about it. What I feel is like a big, kind of issue in terms of the preventative health side is there's been this movement, kind of, yes, in a very positive way, away from pharmaceutical interventions and so forth, and into what this new field, functional medicine. And functional medicine is more focused on kind of getting towards the root cause of what your problems are and that kind of thing. But then again, it's like it's most of those situations that I've seen are kind of, again, treating that with just something else. It's like, okay, you're deficient in magnesium and in vitamin D and so forth. So take these supplements. And it's not either. There may be some nutritional guidance. You can, these are the things you should eat instead of that. But I think on the prevention side, it's like that's part of it, and that's getting us down the path of like kind of like providing people with an easy solution to getting their greens in a greens powder from Liver Super, or other types of things that you can put in your coffee and nootropics and whatever else. But I feel like there's another step that, on the preventative side, where it's like looking at what are the reasons why people are this way, and why is this becoming such a huge problem, and why are fertility rates going through the floor, and why are there all these like earlier cases of obesity and different types of fatty liver disease, which is meant for people who are like alcoholics and so forth in children, and it has to do with our food source and where things are being made and what people are eating. So I think that there's a lot of education that has to happen, and it really is kind of what I think as the Healing Company we are focused on with our kind of relationship with practitioners and so forth, and trying to get the word out and being a voice in that space.
I agree. And I think that hopefully with the Healing Hour as well, we're able to bring this like education part a little forward. And what is your meaning of joy?
I think I'll answer that with my, kind of in a way that's maybe a little roundabout way. For me, like not having joy is like waking up in a state of, and it has been because I've like lived, I'm just talking my own experiences, like waking up in pain and like not wanting to get out of bed in the morning. And, that's, me from a physical standpoint. I have a lot of aches and pains and so forth sometimes. And then that also could translate into mental pain for people as well. So it's kind of like, for me, it's like the absence of pain family allows me to have joy. I get such joy from, spending
Feeling
time
great.
with my family and like my kids and my fiance. It's like the one thing where I'm typically a very easygoing and kind of casual and happy-go-lucky and and love to laugh and have fun. It's the one thing that just changes me in a way where I'm not the same person, and it happens from time to time, and you have to deal with it. And unfortunately, I now that I kind of know this more, I kind of know when I'm in pain and that I'm not acting in a particularly a nice way sometimes, or I'm being a little short or what have you, not talking with tact and so forth. So yeah, and I think the people around me kind of will notice as well. Like, are you like in pain today?
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, it's like, yeah, it's that, and then in that space, finding a flow state and I associate joy and kind of bliss and this kind of ability to be outside and in nature and with people and community that people you love.
Yeah, I feel you. When I had my chronic migraines, I was exactly the same. I'm such a happy person. I love being positive and smiling, and I wake up in the mornings and just I'm this morning person. I wake up and I'm like, yes, let's get the day started. But with living with chronic migraines, I literally woke up every morning opening one eye and I'm like, how am I feeling? Do I have migraine? No, I'm okay. And everything I did was just really slowly and always being afraid of that it could hit me at that moment. And it was just so weird because this whole energetic body and this lightness of being that I used to have was gone because I was always constantly afraid that it would come. I knew that at that point I would have to go and find a bed, close the curtains, close my eyes, and I would be gone for the next couple hours or 24 hours or more. So
yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I mean, it's something that I've seen, and my fiance suffers from the same affliction, and it's really incredibly debilitating. And I feel getting back to the comment you made about biohacking and it being kind of a word that's a little bit alienating and so forth. And I feel the whole kind of health community kind of rallies around men's health issues in a way that they don't women's health issues. And migraines is one of those things that I think is kind of one of the most prevalent, and it really affects women much more frequently.
I think because of the hormonal,
men. It's only kind of recently where there's been some interventions and medications and things that are focused on that, and it's so it's such a huge and deeply debilitating issue. And I heard somewhere, and don't quote me on this, but that there's more people who suffer from migraines, I would say primarily women, than diabetes, which is, I don't know, I don't know whether that's true or not, but even that someone would kind of offer that to be true is shows what a massive issue it is.
It is. And no one really speaks about it because it's always this thing that everyone deals with themselves.
Right.
It's just I was so quiet and no one really knew except my family, because I would just be oh no, I'm staying home tonight. Yeah. And
and menopause is another one. And so I really feel at the Healing Company that we're kind of focused in the right direction and kind of squarely in a position to really be helping women's health and women's issues and women's leadership like yourself.
Looking into your personal inspiration a little bit more, obviously you mentioned some experts and people you look up to in the biohacking space, but is there anyone in particular you learned from and that you see achieving inspiring breakthroughs in healing?
My role at the Healing Company is one where, every day I'm meeting the most interesting people who are on the cutting edge of doing the coolest stuff. And, looking at what's happening in AI. I think that's an area that I think is going to be massive on a going forward basis. But when I think about most recent conversations and people I've spoken with and so forth, I mentioned this name earlier is Dr. Zach Bush, who I think he is really kind of on the cutting edge and really will be one of the leading voices in this world and in this space, particularly with all the things that he's focused on with the gut microbiome and how the impact of things like glyphosate, which is Roundup, which is in almost every product that we have, and even stuff that we think is incredibly healthy and organic, whatever. It's a massive problem. So anyway, that's probably the person that I would say is at the kind of forefront of people who I want to be watching on a going forward basis.
Yeah. And are there any like books or podcasts that provided you a lot of inspiration in life?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier, I mean, I think Andrew Huberman's podcast is great, and Peter Attia and Rhonda Patrick, they have some, kind of, I subscribe. I'm a subscriber, so I'm getting some, premium content and so forth, but it's just because I'm geeking out on this stuff. There's other, there's other, kind of cool voices out there. Luke Story is one, and the usual suspects like Ben Greenfield and Dave Asprey and so forth. But I kind of like dig in on things that are a little bit more scientific. Yeah.
And what's next in your personal healing journey? What are you most excited for?
Studying the Institute of Integrative Nutrition Health Coaching, kind of platform. And I look at that and I look at kind of directionally where that's headed. And I think that what's next is going to be some version of coaching that's, AI based. And there's people out there who are doing this now, but it's going to be getting better and better all the time. And I think marrying that with longevity and longevity science and kind of figuring out a way of taking some of these interventions and things that people are doing and advice around longevity and longevity medicine, where people are paying $30,000 or $50,000 a year to, get this kind of advice and guidance. I'd like to see that be $30 to $50 a month, so it's kind of like, that's kind of for me where I think what I'd like to see happening.
And where can people go to follow you and keep up to date with everything that you're doing?
I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram, and those are probably the two best ways of reaching me or finding me on those two platforms.
Yeah, and then always the Healing Company.
Yes, exactly.
Where John is very involved. Well, thank you so much, John. I really, really appreciate it. And I love learning more about you. I learn something about you every time we speak. Something new.
Yeah, and me too.
So fascinating.
That's great.